Hey guys, it's Elliot with Backyard Sports Media, and I'm bringing you my second mock draft of the 2025 NFL draft cycle here today. First off, just wanted to apologize for the long break since my last video. Been super busy in my personal life and hadn't had a ton of time outside of work to record these videos. But now that the combine is over with, wanted to go ahead and hop on and give you guys my second mock draft here. So we will jump right into the Titans at one. And I think the biggest question mark surrounding this pick is, will the Titans be the one to make it, or will they be trading out? I mean, there's definitely some teams that I think could be interested in moving up. I think you look at the Giants at three. I think you look at the Raiders at six, Jets at seven, I think are the most realistic options. I think maybe even the Saints at nine could also, be a possibility, but I think nine is probably a little bit too far of a jump back. I don't think the Titans are going to want to move that far back. I think they'll want to stay in the top seven for sure. So I think they'll probably only seriously consider offers from like the Giants at three, Raiders at six, and Jets at seven. Of course, all of those teams being super quarterback needy would be moving up for Cam Ward, who I think is, now cemented himself as the quarterback one in this class. I don't think Sanders will be the first quarterback off the board. I think it is cemented to be Ward. I think there is a world where Sanders could actually slip further than what we initially thought was possible, and I won't spoil anything, but we might see that in this mock draft here today. But I do think Ward will be the first quarterback off the board. The question is, will he be the first player off of the board? Of course, I think Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are the two others that are in contention there. I think it'll be one of those three. I don't foresee a world where it's another person. I love Tedero McMillan. I love Mason Graham. Love Will Campbell, but I just don't see any of these guys going ahead of Ward, Abdul Carter, or Travis Hunter. I think one of those three will be the first overall pick. Carter and Hunter, obviously, because they are generational prospects. And then Cam Ward, not generational, but he's a quarterback. They're going to go early. He's the top quarterback. It's just how things work in today's day and age. You have to have a quarterback. It's the most important position. So I think it's going to be one of those three guys. Titans are interesting here. They've talked about wanting a generational player. They've talked about they think there are blue chip players in this class. Most people assume they're not talking about the quarterback position. Most people think they're talking about, like I said, Carter or Hunter. Do they stick and pick here? Do they really, really want one of those guys? Or maybe do they start to listen to these other teams and try to get some picks and some capital to move back? Because maybe there's not any guy that they just love here at number one. Maybe they're okay with rolling with Will Levis at quarterback for next year. I think what's going to end up happening, I think they will move back. And today we're going to explore the possibility of the New York Giants moving up to get Cam Ward. And I'm not going to worry about the actual compensation here because, of course, that's extremely hard to predict. So I'm not even going to attempt to do that. But just know it would, I mean, moving up from three to one, I think it would probably have to be like a next year first for the Giants. Maybe there's a world where they don't have to give up next year's first, but it probably would have to include next year's first. Even though it's not a huge jump up, I think it probably would, just because the Titans have all the leverage in this situation. Giants don't have a ton. Being at that third spot, there could be a world where Ward and Sanders go one and two. And if the Giants really need a quarterback, then boom, they're left without one. So I think the Titans know that, and they'll be definitely wanting a king's ransom for the number one overall pick wherever they trade it to. But I think the Titans would be most interested in trading to the Giants. I think that would be make the most sense for them. Just because that way they're only having to move back to three. They can still get either Carter or Hunter, whichever one the Browns don't take, or maybe they have their pick, if the Browns go with Sanders in this scenario. But I think the Titans, it would be in their best interest to move with the Giants. So that does give the Giants a little bit of leverage in this situation, but it's going to cost the Giants a lot of money, a lot of capital, I mean. But I think it's something that they need to do. They lose out on the Matthew Stafford sweepstakes. He ends up staying in LA. I think they're going to move up for a quarterback here. I think Shane and Dayball, they have to. I think they are on the hottest of hot seats. They have to go get a player. There's rumors about Aaron Rodgers being on their short list of guys, that they're considering for their next quarterback. I just don't know if that's the smartest decision, because if you go get Aaron Rodgers and then you have a Jets 2.0 situation, then I can absolutely guarantee that Dayball and Joe Shane will be fired. They will not be keeping their jobs. Whereas if you draft Cam Ward, obviously you still want to have success early on just for your own job's sake, but maybe, you can have a little bit of struggle in year one with Ward. And, as long as you're Dable and Shane, if you can come up with a really good pitch to John Mara, the Giants owner, and say, hey, we've got a really good plan. We really know how we're going to develop him. We know how we're going to lead him to success, how he can lead us to success. Then, maybe there's a chance they could keep their jobs. But if they go get a veteran, bring Tyrod Taylor back or Aaron Rodgers, Jameis Winston, whoever, Sam Darnold, and if they don't win, they're done. It's 100% guaranteed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's not even a 0.1% chance that they keep their jobs. If they draft a young guy, they draft a young quarterback, there is a chance they could keep their jobs even if they struggle. So it just kind of depends on how good of a pitch they give, what they look like on the field, are the guys motivated, things like that. So I think the Giants will be very interested in getting a young guy. I think moving up to one, allowing them to have their pick of the litter, will be a great move for the Giants. I don't know that Cam Ward is worth taking over Hunter or Carter. But like I said, if you're the Giants, I just don't know that you have much choice. I don't think you can really afford to go in any other route. I think you have to go with a quarterback, and moving up to get one is the best choice, because if you don't, there's a world where the quarterbacks could go 1 and 2, and then you're left without one, and you're in a really tough spot. So brings up the Browns here at 2, and it's pretty common, and I'm going to keep sticking with it. It's going to be Abdul Carter. I think, especially Myles Garrett, he has now publicly requested a trade, the week before the Super Bowl. I think that just further cements that the Browns are going to want to take Carter. Obviously, there could be a world where Carter goes number 1 and they're not able to get him. But I think if he's available there too, you take him. I think it makes a ton of sense. Quarterback is, of course, a thought. They definitely need one. Deshaun Watson is just, everybody knows the situation at this point. He's just not going to be your quarterback of the future. He might not even play next year because of the injuries, let alone the horrible contract and the horrible play on the field. It's just, I could go on for days. He's just not a quarterback in this NFL anymore. He's just not going to be starting caliber. He's not even probably going to be a backup in this league. But at the same time, I think veteran is probably just better route for them. I think they just need to punt on this year. I don't know. I know teams don't do that. They don't just straight up tank right before the season. They're not going to just tank right before the season even starts. But I just don't see it. Whether you draft a guy, veteran guy, it's just not going to be a successful year for the Browns. I think Browns fans know this. I think Browns coaching staff knows this. Ownership knows this. It's just is what it is. I think no matter what you do in this draft, you're not going to be successful next year. So, but that doesn't mean this draft isn't important. That means I think you have an opportunity to take the best. You just take best player available every single round, even if it's a position you feel like you're good in. Take best player available, because at this point, who knows? Like, you might think you're good at edge rusher because you got Myles Garrett, but now he's requesting a trade. You might think you're good at corner, but who knows? Denzel Ward doesn't seem too happy being there. He said that if Garrett leaves, he doesn't know that he's super confident he's going to stick around. So I think you just take BPA in every round. I think right here that's Abdul Carter, and I think he'll be able to step in, and don't expect him to fill Myles Garrett's shoes, but he's going to be a great player. I think he's a great prospect, ton of potential, but also can help them right now. So I think it would make a ton of sense for the Browns here at 2. Titans at 3 after trading back. For me, it's going to be Travis Hunter. Titans are able to trade back and still get one of their, blue chip prospects that they are referencing. I think the guys that they're referencing, of course, they've not explicitly said, but I think they are referencing Carter and Hunter, and they're able to get one of those guys while still trading back, getting some capital, for this draft, for maybe next year's draft. I don't know what the exact package would be, but being able to load up on picks and hopefully infuse some talent into your roster, while also adding a really, really high end player as well with Travis Hunter. I think that's a huge win for the Titans front office. Would be a great start to their, careers here with Borgonzi and some of those other new guys in the Titans front office. I think this would be a great start for them. Like I said, I think Travis Hunter would be a home run, especially getting him at 3 rather than 1, and getting those additional picks that would come along with that. So looking at Patriots here at 4, for me, I think there's a couple of guys this could be here. The Patriots just have so many needs. Honestly, I really think it could be definitely Tedero McMillan, Mason Graham, Will Campbell. Honestly, they need just about every position on the field other than maybe quarterback. And so, of course, that, I think just BPA here, and I think it happens to align with maybe their most needed position in wide receiver. It's going to be Tedero and McMillan. I think this is the alpha receiver you can put out there and go make a play. I think Patriots fans might really want T. Higgins. I don't know if it's going to be a possibility. Of course, he was franchise tagged again by the Cincinnati Bengals. He could be traded, and the Patriots definitely have the money to pay T. Higgins. But do you want to give up draft capital for him? I'm not really sure. With the state that their roster's in, don't think that that's the best decision. I don't think you need to be giving up capital. I think you need to be gaining capital. I think you need to be stocking up on draft picks, maybe trading down. Who knows? Maybe they don't take McMillan here. Maybe they look at trading down. But I think in this scenario, when you've got McMillan on the board, he's a great player. Drake May's going to need some weapons, absolutely. Of course, he's going to need an O line too, and they're going to need to improve on defense. Like I said, they just need to improve across the board. They don't have a lot of talent on that roster, but I think McMillan is able to step in, and he's going to be a really exciting player. Obviously, like, you want a lot of talent and you want a guy who can step in and be really good, but it's also nice to have a guy who you're going to sell a lot of jerseys of. You're going to sell more tickets because of him. And like, that's something that we don't necessarily think about as fans, but I can guarantee you owners are thinking of that. It makes a big deal. And that makes this draft pick a little bit easier for them. Like I said, it just kind of checks every box. I think for the Patriots almost makes too much sense. So another pick that I think makes almost too much sense, and I'm going to keep going back to it at 5 with the Jags. It's going to be Mason Graham. I think this is a guy. I love Mason Graham. I think he has the potential to be one of the best defensive tackles in this league. Is just a generational talent at the position. I get super excited watching his tape. I think he's a guy who could make a real impact. And I think the Jags would love to have a guy like this at 5. I think could go higher than this for sure. Like I said, Patriots need about every position on the field, so Patriots could take him. I think if the Titans view him, maybe they view Mason Graham as one of their blue chip guys that they were referencing and take him. Honestly, who knows? I don't know how high Mason Graham could truly go. I mean, I don't think he would go 1. I don't see a scenario there, but maybe he goes 2 or 3. I don't know. I really don't know. I really like him, and if he went 2 or 3, I wouldn't be like absolutely shocked, like, oh, that's the worst pick of all time. Like, I would. I think it would make sense. He's a great player. I think the most logical landing spot, though, just based off of the draft order and the team needs, I think Jacksonville at 5 just makes too much sense. I think it's going to be one that I continue to mock and kind of come back to. Now, here's where we're going to start to open it up a little bit, get a little bit interesting. The Raiders here at 6. McMillan's off the board. I think receiver's a big need for them. Genty would make a ton of sense. They need playmakers, and that includes the running back position. I think Burden would make a lot of sense, but it might be a little rich here at 6. I think Jahdae Barron is a great player, had a great combine. He's a guy that, just after hearing him talk at the combine and after seeing, what he was able to do on the field, he's a guy that I'm really excited about. I think could definitely make a real impact in this league, but at 6 might just be a little bit too high. So I think what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go with another guy who had a great combine and I think could definitely start to rise back up some boards, and that's going to be James Pierce Jr. It's a guy who, before the college football season started, was a guy who was projected number 1 overall pick, bare minimum was going to be a top 3 pick, like very highly touted guy. Then had a little bit of a slow start, a little bit of some nagging injury things, and just kind of started to fall further and further back. And really, but I think if you look back at the season he had, it was not bad at all. I think he's been ultra productive, especially comparing him to the other edge rushers in this class. And then when you pair that with the combine performance that he just had, I just don't see a world where he's not going in the top half of the first round. And I think there's a legitimate possibility he's going in the top 10. I don't think he will go top 5 just based off of the other guys in this class, but I think there's a very, very real possibility he's going top 10, and which is, can be crazy to think about and crazy to say when not too long ago we were talking about, oh, maybe this guy even slips out of the first round. I mean, there was a legitimate conversation there for a minute, but now I think looking back at the tape from this season, and then I think most importantly, the combine performance he put on was just otherworldly. I think everybody's going to talk about the 40, and he did great in that. But I think if you actually look at the on the field drills, he also looked really, really good in those on the field drills. And I think he is going to go very high in this draft. I think the Raiders at 6 would make a ton of sense. It might not be their biggest need, but I think if you can go out there and get a very, very big time playmaker, I think Pete Carroll knows the value of having just an electric shutdown defense. And I think that starts with your D line. And so I think James Pierce Jr. would be a great pick here at 6 for the Raiders. So looking at the Jets here at 7, need a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders is on the board, but I do think they are going to roll with a veteran. I think there's been some reports of Tyrod Taylor, of course, just keeping him around. I think they could go the Jameis Winston route. I doubt Sam Darnold goes back to New York, especially with the Jets. I don't see that happening, but it could. I'm not going to rule it out completely. But I think they're going to go the veteran route. So I think they're going to pass on Shedeur Sanders here, and I think, potentially patch up some bigger needs. Aaron Glenn, former corner himself, I think is going to go dip into the corner well because the Jets are going to desperately need it because DJ Reed going to leave in free agency. I think that's pretty much guaranteed at this point. And Sauce Gardner is under contract still, but I don't know, based off of what I've seen and, the way he talks and the way he, interacts on social media, I don't know that I would count on him being there long term. He definitely does not seem thrilled with some of the decisions that have been made. Maybe the Aaron Glenn hiring will keep him around. Maybe he'll be really excited about that. I'm interested to hear his take on that. I haven't heard or, heard him reference, what he thinks about Aaron Glenn, but I wouldn't necessarily count on Sauce Gardner, but long term. But even if you do, you need somebody to play opposite of him because DJ Reed's going to be gone, and they really just don't have anybody outside of those two guys. So I think Will Johnson would be a great pick here for the Jets at 7. Like I said, corner is just a huge need for them, and I think Will Johnson, other than Travis Hunter, is the best corner in this class. Travis Hunter, obviously, a little bit of an anomaly. I'm going to kind of not necessarily talk about him as the best receiver or the best corner. He's just kind of in a class of his own, very unique player. Obviously, never really been anybody like him. But I think Will Johnson is the best traditional corner in this class. I'll put it that way. So I think it would be a great pick for the Jets here at 7. And I think that's a route they'll look to go with Aaron Glenn at the helm now. So Panthers at 8 here. I'm going to go with a little bit of an interesting one. We're going to have a trade. Going to have the San Francisco 49ers moving up to get Will Campbell. And of course, once again, not going to worry about the exact compensation and things. But I think this is a situation where Niners hopefully don't plan on picking this highly again. They're at 11. I think they hope to continue to have success. They know that they have a lot of talent on their roster. They just got ravaged by injuries. And so I think they're going to take advantage of this opportunity, move up and get a guy that I think will make a huge difference for them. I think would be a super, super exciting player for them, whether it's at guard or at tackle. Of course, everybody's going to talk about the arm length and can he stick at tackle. Um, I think people are making a little bit bigger of a deal out of it than it needs to be. The normal threshold is 34 inches. He measured in at 33 and 7/8 inches. Like, we're talking about an eighth of an inch here. Like, I really don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I think based off of the tape, based off of being like right there in the measurables. I know he technically doesn't hit the minimum threshold, but he's right there. I think he can play tackle if he wants to. But you put him in San Francisco, maybe he doesn't need to. I think guard might even be a bigger need for them. And maybe he plays guard, in the first couple of years and then kicks out to tackle when Trent Williams inevitably retires. I think this would be a great pick for them. Like I said, I think the Niners just would look to take advantage of picking this highly. I think they don't plan on doing that again. And they look to jump ahead of the Saints and Bears. Both teams, I think, could take Campbell if he is on the board. And so the Niners want to make sure they can get their guy, jump ahead 2 spots to up to 8. And I think this would be a really great pick for them, would really help them out, both run game and pass game, and just help them both now raise their floor right now, but also raise their ceiling for the future. Give them a really young, feisty offensive lineman who had a great combine, like I said, along with a great season as well. Then we bring up the Saints here at 9. I think they're obviously very frustrated by their in-state player getting nabbed right before them. I think that would have been a guy they would have really loved to have on their roster. They need some offensive line help. And I think we're still going to get them some offensive line help. We're going to look at Missouri's Armand Membu, had a great combine. I think, obviously, like I said, Campbell did as well, but I think Membu had the best combine out of all offensive linemen, tackle, guard, center, no matter the position. I think Membu had the best combine, ran the 40 really well, but obviously that's not really the biggest deal for offensive linemen, but people are still going to talk about it because people love to talk about the 40-yard dash. It's just how it is. But man, you watched him on those on-field drills, and he looked great. I think he looked like a player that can make a huge impact in this league, whether it's at tackle, whether it's at guard, whether it's maybe even at center. I'm honestly not even sure. Saints kind of need help all over the offensive line. I think this would be a great pick for them. I think probably Membu would be playing right tackle for the Saints. I think that would make the most sense. That's where they have the biggest need at, with Ryan Ramczyk most likely retiring. I think, and the fact that Membu played there in college, I think that would make the most sense. So, bringing up the Bears at 10, I mean, got to be just devastated that Campbell and Membu both get nabbed just right before them. I think would both be players that the Bears would love to have on their roster. But I think, they look at maybe a Genti here. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think Ben Johnson knows the value of a strong running game. And I think that that's one that's been pretty commonly mocked here. But I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. I think a need that is very big that nobody's talking about is, I think, a defensive tackle. And I'm going to go Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. Walter Nolan is a guy who I think is there's definitely a conversation on who's the next best D tackle behind Mason Graham. But I think Walter Nolan is doing a really good job of putting his name squarely in the ring for being the next defensive tackle off the board. And like I said, I think D tackle is a lot bigger need for the Bears than what people are talking about. People are going to want to talk about running back and interior offensive line, maybe like edge rusher as well. But I really think I do probably agree that interior is the biggest need for them, but who do they take? I don't think after Campbell and Membu is off the board, like I don't maybe you take Kelvin Banks and move him inside, but I really think that I think Walter Nolan would be a better pick here at this spot. I think it's a bigger need than what people are really giving it credit for, and I think Nolan would be a really great player, able to step in there and make an impact right away from day one. Athletic freak, and would have a lot of fun in that Dennis Allen defense. I know Dennis Allen would love to have a guy like that, in the middle, able to make plays in the run game and the pass game. I think that would be a big deal for the Bears. And maybe the Bears fans would be mad, want Genty. I get it. But I do think D tackle is a bigger need than what people are talking about for the Bears. So Panthers on the clock here after trading back with the 49ers. And for me, this is going to be Jahdae Barron from Texas, a guy who, like I kind of referenced earlier, had a great combine. Both I think on the field, but also off the field. I think just what he was saying. I think for me, I think he just was the way he was speaking. He seems like a very driven guy. Seems like a guy who is ready to play at the next level, ready to be a leader at the next level. And I think teams are going to really value that. I think us as fans, we get really enamored with the 40-yard dash and the bench press and the vertical and all this and that. And the teams do value those things. The teams get enamored with it too because they're human beings that are scouting these teams. But I think teams really, really, really value those interviews and doing well in the interview process. And who knows, Jahdae Barron might have bombed the actual interviews, but when he was talking to the press, it seemed like he was really ready to make this jump to the next level and seemed like a guy who I would love to have on my team. I think seems like a guy who would be just a great player. And I think after teams seeing the success of Trent McDuffie, I think teams seeing the success of Brian Branch, and those guys. I know McDuffie went about mid 20s. Brian Branch went in the second round. Guys that are slot corners primarily. So teams traditionally might not want to draft them. But I think after seeing the success of these guys, I think teams will want to draft these guys higher. And Barron fits right in the mold of the previous two guys. He might not be as good of a tackler as Brian Branch, but I really think like he's very comparable to Trent McDuffie. I think he's a guy who can step in and be one of the best slot corners in the league from day one, but also can have some outside flexibility that in a pinch, you have some injuries that inevitably will happen, can step outside and play on the outside as well, like McDuffie's had to do in Kansas City. I think that would be a really big deal, for any team to be able to have that. I think that's a hugely valuable thing. And I think Jahdae Barron is going to be able to do that. I think he's going to go higher than people maybe think, or maybe the casual fan might expect, from a slot corner. Cowboys here at 12. Of course, Ashton Genty is going to be the most talked about name here, has been pretty much throughout the draft process. I mean, even early on in the college football season, midway through the year, end of college football season, post college football season, it's always been Genty, 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 Genty. And I think it makes a ton of sense. Wouldn't shock me at all, of course, if it did happen. I'm going to go a little bit of a different route. I am going to go maybe the next most common guy that's been mocked here, and that's going to be Luther Burden. I think they just need receiving help. I think, yes, they need a running back desperately badly. They just need playmakers. I think you can maybe find another, veteran, short term running back to pair with Rico Dowdle. Maybe you go out and get an Aaron Jones. I'm not really sure. You're not going to get a guy that's as good as Genty. You're not. Or maybe you draft a guy in the second, third, fourth round, whatever. It's not going to be as good as Genty. I know Genty is a generational prospect, but I think Burden would help them in their offense more. I think just they need to get a running back, but I just don't know that they target it here at 12. I think Daniel Jeremiah had a great take on it this weekend, talking about drafting a running back highly. He said that drafting a running back, you can draft one very highly and they can be very valuable. He said the most important thing for him is making sure that you have a plan in place for them and you're ready to go. The team around them is ready to go, because if it's not, if you feel like the team isn't ready to go compete for a Super Bowl, and drafting a running back is probably not the best thing, because you're going to waste the first 2-3 years of his career. And you're going to waste a lot of carries, because the way running backs operate essentially nowadays is you have a certain number of carries you're going to get from them in their career. And you got guys that might get a ton of carries in college, and that means they're not going to get as many in the NFL, because before injuries start to set in and things like that. Or you might have guys who didn't get a ton in college. You look at like a Devon Achane and things like that. Like who might be able to last a little bit longer in the NFL. And so I think teams are cognizant of that. They're aware of that now. And I think you have to have a plan in place. You have to have a team set up. I think drafting a running back when you're not ready to compete for a Super Bowl is just not the smartest thing to do. And I think the Cowboys are not going to compete for a Super Bowl. They don't have the roster in place. They don't have the team in place to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. So I think Genty would make a ton of sense being from Texas. They really need a running back, but I like what Daniel Jeremiah said. I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you don't feel like you're ready to compete for a Super Bowl, then drafting a running back highly is just not the best route. I think you have other needs you need to go tackle. The Cowboys definitely do. Receiver, maybe offensive line with Zach Martin retiring. I think there's a lot of holes on defense. Like I think the only way you draft a running back highly is if you feel like that's the only thing you have left. That's the only hole you have left to fill. Kind of like the Eagles with Saquon. That wasn't drafting, but paying a bunch of money to one in free agency is kind of the same thing. Don't do it unless you feel like it's the only hole you have left. Then it can be a really great thing if that is the case, because you saw what happened with the Eagles. He was, I think, the piece that moved them over the top, able to help them win a Super Bowl. So it can be a really great thing. Just probably don't do it if you feel like you're not ready to compete for a Super Bowl yet. If you have other bigger, more pressing needs, and I think the Cowboys certainly do. Dolphins here at 13. This could definitely be an offensive lineman. I think they definitely need to invest in that. I think Tua has been sacked way too often, gotten hit way too often. Part of it's his own fault, but I think he gets the ball out really quickly. So when he does get sacked, a lot of times it is on the offensive line. I think they need to invest in that, keep him healthy, because they're paying him too much money for him to be injured all the time. But at the same time, I do feel like that defense is just lacking tremendously. And I think looking at a guy like Kenneth Grant, I think would help them out a ton. Miami loves their speed. They love their athletic freaks. And most of the time you are going to think of that as running backs and receivers and tight ends. They want the fastest guys at those positions. I think they're going to want fastest guys at guard and defensive tackle, and they want the big guys to be fast too. And Kenneth Grant is a huge dude, but he's also very fast. He's very, very athletic, and I think could be a very exciting player in this league. And I think the Dolphins would love to snatch him up here at 13. Colts at 14. Another athletic freak, a guy who I have not personally had going this high, and I'm not seeing him go this high, but I think it is a definite possibility after this past weekend. It's going to be Nick Emanwari from South Carolina. If you didn't see what he did at the combine, pause the video and come back. Go check out what he did at the combine. I mean, it was just insane. I mean, we're talking I think his measurables are 6'3", 220. Yeah, 6'3", 227. I think he officially weighed in at the combine closer to like 220. But either way, ran a 4.40. I think had 20 or 22 reps on the bench press, had a 43-inch vertical. I mean, just otherworldly type stuff. I can't remember if it was Trevor Sikkema. I can't remember who. Somebody tweeted out and said that his draft comparison was Steve Rogers post Super Soldier Serum. Couldn't agree more. I mean, the dude seems like a beast, and I think maybe it might be shocking to some to see him first safety off the board over Malachi Starks, but the Colts love to draft based off of the relative athletic score, RAS. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's I can't remember what account it is on Twitter, but he basically calculates an athletic score for all these guys based off their measurables and their combine performances. And Nicky Manwari was a perfect 10 out of 10, highest RAS score for a safety all time. Colts use that very heavily when they're drafting players. They love long, lanky guys, fast guys. They want the most athletic players at every position. The Colts generally will draft that way. And I think Nicky Manwari would make a ton of sense here for them. I think it's a guy who some people might be shocked to see him go this highly, but like I said, this is the way the Colts draft, and he had a stellar combine. So at this point, it wouldn't totally shock me to see him go this high. So Falcons at 15. This is going to be Mike Green. I think this pick makes a ton of sense. I'm banking on the Falcons taking a defensive player. I've very used to them not. They usually will go offensive in the first round, go with a playmaker. We've seen them go tight end, running back, receiver, quarterback, in the past like 4 drafts. Like I can't even remember the last time they took a defensive guy in the first round. But I'm going to believe the reports that are out there that they apparently have only talked with defensive players. They've only interviewed defensive players, and I'm hoping that rumor is true. I'm going to roll with it. I think they need to invest in defense, but they've needed to invest in defense for the past 4 or 5 years, and they never do it. I think this will be the year. Hopefully, I think those reports are true. They've only been talking to defensive players, and I think Mike Green would make a ton of sense, would fit into that defense really, really well. they've needed to draft an edge rusher for a while now. Mike Green would make a ton of sense, fits their defensive style perfectly. I think Cardinals at 16 here. Notice we got Tyler Warren and Genty still on the board, as well as Malachi Stark. So we got some really good prospects that are slipping just a little bit. So we're gonna have the Minnesota Vikings trade up for Ashton Genty. I think there are a couple of teams coming up that could take Genty. You got the Bengals at 17, you got the Broncos at 20, I think Chargers at 22, maybe even the Steelers at 21, if they let Najee Harris walk. Um, all teams that could take Genty, and I think the Vikings would love to have Genty able to jump up, get their guy. I mean, they've seen it's been several years now, but they know what it means to have a generational running back. I mean, of course, they had the last running back to win MVP in Adrian Peterson. I think inserting a generational running back into that offense, no matter who's doing the quarterbacking, whether it's Darnold, on the franchise tag or a long term deal, or JJ McCarthy, whoever it is, having Ashton Genty would help them out tremendously because I think Sam Darnold, at this point, we know that if he's going to be successful, he's going to need some pieces around him. JJ McCarthy is an unknown, but I think with a young quarterback, it's always best to get as many players around him as you possibly can, make his life easier. So no matter which quarterback it is, I think Genty would help them out tremendously. They've got a good offensive line already in place. And kind of like I talked about the running back thing earlier, I think the Vikings have some holes they could potentially address, but I also think you insert a running back into there, and who knows if JJ McCarthy plays up to his potential, I'm not going to say Super Bowl contender, but they could be a team that could go up there and contend. I mean, Brian Flores is a great defensive coordinator, so he's going to bring it defensively. Kevin O'Connell's a mastermind offensively. Who knows? I think, they could have competed for a Super Bowl this year, but Sam Darnold kind of laid an egg in the playoffs. So if you can get Darnold to not do that, or if you roll with McCarthy and he doesn't, and you add Genty in there, they could definitely make some noise. So I think this is a trade that would make a lot of sense. Cardinals are also able to just recoup some assets, hopefully be able to insert some more talent defensively because the Cardinals defensively just do not have very much talent. Even offensively, you got Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride, but outside of that, it's a little bit lacking. So they just really need some more talent. So being able to trade back and get some more assets would be really nice for the Cardinals as well. Bengals here at 17, ton of defensive needs. I think there are a lot of defensive players that would make a lot of sense. For me, I just don't see it happening. I think they're going to continue to go down the offensive route. They love to do it. They love to stash up these offensive playmakers, especially because I think T. Higgins will be traded. He's been tagged already, but I think he will be traded. It's going to be Tyler Warren here. I think this would be really fun for the Bengals. They're also able to rationalize it a little bit more because not only can he be a playmaker, but he can block in the run game and really help spring the run game in that way, help Chase Brown out and whatever other running backs they have back there. I think Tyler Warren would make a ton of sense for the Bengals at 17 here. Seahawks at 18, going to be Georgia's Mykel Williams. I think this is a player who, when you think about how the Seahawks have traditionally drafted over the years, I think Mykel Williams fits that mold perfectly. And of course, I know Mike McDonald is now there, but I think Mike McDonald also kind of has drafted that way, last year. And then also during his time with the Ravens, as the DC there, I think this is a guy that fits the mold of what he's looking for in an edge rusher, has got kind of that ideal size, 6'5", about 260, 270. I think he's an athletic freak, of course. Like, I think this just makes a lot of sense for the Seahawks here at 18. It fits the mold of what they've been looking for, I think, to a T. I think this is the most Seahawks player of all Seahawks players. Like, I think this would just make almost too much sense here at 18. We'll get the Buccaneers here at 19, going to have another trade, going to have the Los Angeles Rams move up here to 19. And whoops, forgot to actually select the picks here. There we go. And we are going to have them take Colston Loveland. I think reason for the trade, I think Broncos would be very likely to take Loveland at 20. Rams want to move up, get their guy, don't want to risk it and wait for him to get to 26. And so I think this would be a guy that Sean McVay would love to have in that offense, play as a big slot, play even on the outside as a receiver, play inline tight end, can move around, maybe have him in the backfield some. Like, this is a guy who I think just has amazing receiving skills for a tight end. I think definitely, you would want to think of him more as like a big receiver, kind of hybrid receiver, because He is lacking a little bit on the blocking side, but he's not a horrible blocker. He's not like just absolutely horrible. Like he'll be able to go out there and block better than, normal receivers would, which is good. And I think he has receiving type skills in a big body, would be able to make a lot of plays. Bringing Stafford back, but you're probably going to lose Cooper Cup. So hopefully able to replace Cooper Cup with another playmaker really help Stafford out because Stafford's going to want to feed his guys. And of course, he's got Puka Nakua, Kyron Williams, but you want to get him another playmaker in there. I think Loveland's able to do that for you. Broncos at 20, probably pretty frustrated that Loveland is no longer on the board. I think Sean Payton would have loved to have a guy like that in his offense. I think they need to go playmaker still. You look at receiver, I think is definitely in play. You got Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. I think for me, I like Golden better, and that's going to be the pick here. I think will be drafted higher just because of, the athleticism that's there. I think is going to really wow teams and lead him to being drafted higher. I think you look at the tape, and Egbuka is a great player. Um, and, I don't always love drafting a guy higher just because of the athleticism, but I think that's just how it's going to happen. I think Golden, running the fastest 40 after, Isaiah Bond claimed that he was going to do it. Golden actually ended up doing it. Kind of a funny outcome there, but Golden ended up running a 4.29 and also did well in the on the field drills as well. So I think he's just going to end up getting drafted higher. It's just how it works. Like, I don't love using the 40 as a massive thing because I think on the field makes more of a difference. Like your true play speed makes more of a difference, and the production you put up in college, I think to me is really valuable. But teams do value the combine stuff. That's why they still do it. So I think Golden's going to end up probably going higher than Egbuka, and Broncos really, really desperately need to add playmakers in that offense. And Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren being off the board, I think leads them to take a receiver. And so I think Golden make a lot of sense there at 20. Another team that needs a receiver is the Steelers at 21, but I've mentioned it before. I just don't see it happening. Steelers are one of those teams that just does not draft them in the first round. They love drafting them in the second round, but I just don't see them taking one in the first round, even if it is their biggest need. I agree that it is their biggest need. You can sit here and scream at me all you want. I agree with you. Receiver is their biggest need, and it's probably not even close. I still don't think they're going to do it. I just don't think they're going to do it. I think they love to draft defense in the first round. If they draft offense, it's usually like offensive line. Um, they've even drafted a running back more recently than they've drafted a receiver in the first round. So I think taking that into consideration, they also really, really need corner. I mean, people want to talk about receiver with them. They need corner almost as badly. And I'm going to go with a guy who had an amazing combine. And I think he's going to fly up some boards, and that's Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. I mean, just did everything well this weekend in Indianapolis at the combine. Like I said, I think he's going to go higher than what people are expecting, or at least where he is at right now, on PFF's big board and some other big boards that are out there. I think he's going to go higher than what people have him currently listed. I think when you talk about some of the biggest winners from this past weekend, I think Maxwell Harrison has made himself a lot of money. And I think the Steelers would make a lot of sense here at 21 because they desperately need a corner. Chargers at 22, another team that needs a playmaker. But Jim Harbaugh does love to get his big guys, whether it's a defensive lineman, offensive lineman. He loves to draft in the trenches. He's been on record saying that offensive line is the most important position in football. But I don't know. They need an interior offensive lineman, not a tackle. Because of course Simmons and Banks are on the board here, great players, but they really need more of an interior guy. I just don't know that there is one here to take. Maybe you take North Dakota State's Gray Zabel. I think that would not be a bad pick at all for them. But I'm going to think and lean on the fact that I think maybe they will listen to Justin Herbert, hopefully listen to his input a little bit, get him a receiver, go get Emeka Egbuka. I think would be a great pick for the Los Angeles Chargers. Of course, some people might say, why are you going to draft Egbuka when you already got Lad McConkey in the slot? But I really think both of those guys are talented enough. You can move them around in the offense and still be able to win. I think these are not guys that are just going to be pigeonholed into the slot, can only play in the slot. I think they're both super talented and can move around. And I think this would be a really fun addition to that offense. And like I said, would just make a lot of sense. I'm going to lean on the fact that I think Justin Herbert's going to kind of be in Jim Harbaugh's ear a little bit, saying, hey, I really need another receiver in this offense. This would really help me out. And I think you can invest in interior offensive linemen, maybe in free agency a little bit, or maybe later in this draft, because it's a pretty deep draft. There's not a lot of top end talent at guard and center, but it is a deep draft for that position. So I think you could get a guy in the second round potentially to slot in at one of your guard spots. So Packers at 23. I say all that, and then I'm about to take an interior offensive lineman for the Packers here at 23. It's going to be Gray Zabel. I think this might be a little bit of an unrealistic pick because the Packers love to go defense, especially defensive line. And I think they'll probably, with a Shamar Stewart on the board, it's very likely that they could go with him. Derek Harmon, I could absolutely see that happening. Um, but I think this is a really fun pick. I think Gray Zabel makes a ton of sense to be able to slot in at center. They're going to lose Josh Myers in free agency. I think that's basically a foregone conclusion at this point. Gray Zabel would be a really fun pick. He might not be the most realistic, but you know what? It's a mock draft, and we still have a month and a half before the draft is actually going to happen. So you know what? Maybe this doesn't happen. Probably not super likely. Packers love to draft defense, but I'm gonna go with Gray Zabel. I'm gonna have some fun. I think it's a good pick for them. Would be really fun, and I think Packers fans would really enjoy it. So Cardinals at 24. For me, this is going to be Shamar Stewart. I think this is a guy you would maybe consider drafting at 16, but you move back, get some extra draft picks to 24, and he's still on the board. I think you turn in the card. I think Jonathan Gannon would love a guy like this on defense. They need more talent at all three levels on defense. They are just kind of without it. They just really don't have a lot of talented guys on that defense. I don't really know how else to put it. It's just they need an infusion of youth. They need more talent. I think Shamar Stewart fits the mold of kind of what Jonathan Gannon had in Philadelphia with a couple of guys. I think he would love to have a player like that, maybe a little bit of inside outside flexibility. But I mean, with Shamar Stewart has now, I don't know what he's listed at on PFF, but I think at the combine, yeah, he's listed at 290 PFF. I think at the combine, he weighed in at like 260, though. So he might just be more of a true edge rusher. Either way, Cardinals need interior, edge rusher, everything, all of the above. So I think Shamar Stewart would be a great pick for them. Texans at 25, another interior defensive lineman, going to be Derek Harmon from Oregon. This is a guy who I really, really, really like. I think you think about the other defensive tackles that have been taken. I think he could be in that conversation, with Walter Nolan and Kenneth Grant. I think he probably is just maybe half a step off of them. Hence why, getting drafted here at 25, well, both of those guys get drafted in the teens. But I really don't think he's potentially as far off as some people think. Like some people have him more as like a second round, maybe even middle to late second round guy. I really don't think that at all. I think he will be a first round pick. I really like Derek Harmon, and I think he is going to be a difference maker at the next level. And I don't think he's as far off of Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan as people might initially think. Buccaneers on the clock here at 26 after trading back with the Rams earlier. I think there is an argument here for maybe Jahad Campbell. I think there's an argument for Jalen Walker, Donovan Ezaraku even. I mean, some people might think no way Ezaraku is a first round pick based off of his measurables and his size, but I think with how feisty he is, I mean, the way he plays, I think there is a world where he is a first round pick. It's going to be tough for me here. It's going to be one of those three guys. I think for me, it's hard to predict what the Buccaneers might do. I think all three players fit the mold of what the Buccaneers have looked for in the past at these positions. But I'm going to go Jahad Campbell. I think inside linebacker, desperate need for them. I think they really do need an edge rusher as well. But I think you have some rotational guys who you maybe hope can step up for them. I think, you look at like Chris Braswell. I don't know if he's going to be able to, but I think if you're in Tampa, the hope is that he can step up and be a starter. It might be just a false hope, but I think he can maybe make that jump. An inside linebacker for them, of course, Levante David been there for like 50 years. It feels like, and he's great still, even at his age. But I mean, who knows if he's going to even be there next year? Even if he is, you're not getting more than like maybe 1 or 2 years more of him. That's probably all you're getting. So I think investing in that position is very, very, very important, and I think would be a great thing to do for the Buccaneers. Also, Jahad Campbell can rush the passer as well. If you really need him to, he can rush off the edge. He did it at Alabama a little bit. And no matter where you put him, inside or you have him on the outside rushing the edge, I think it would be a great fit for Tampa Bay. I think this might sound bad to say, but he does remind me a lot of Devin White. And of course, Devin White did not pan out at all, but I think he could be what fans, myself included, hoped Devin White would turn out to be. I had high hopes for Devin White coming out of LSU. I think Jahad Campbell could potentially actually live up to the expectations where Devin White couldn't. So that might scare some Buccaneers fans. Hopefully it doesn't, but I think Jahad Campbell would be a great pick. I think don't get too caught up in that. So Ravens at 27 here. I think Safety's not a huge need for them, but man, Starks still being on the board. I mean, this would be a luxury pick for sure, but that's tough to pass on. Starks is a great, great player, but I think you also have two tackles here that are still available that are really, really good, and tackle is definitely a position of need for them. I'm going to go Ohio State's Josh Simmons. Didn't participate in the combine this week, still recovering from the injury he suffered midway through the year last year against Oregon. Not gonna lie, that does scare me a little bit. In terms of his draft stock, I don't know what that's gonna happen, but I have heard that all things went well in terms of his medical interviews. I don't know what you call that, medical checks or interviews during the combine, but apparently everything, he met with, of course, these team doctors as every prospect does, and apparently everything turned out well, turned out positive. So I don't think he's gonna slide like all the way like out of the first round or like all the way to like the end of the second round or something, but who really knows? There's been some weird things that have happened before. We've had like Nakobe Dean, a guy who I thought was penciled in as like a late first round pick, early second at the worst. A couple years ago, I can't remember what draft that was, but it was like maybe 2 years ago. Ends up going like middle of the third to Philadelphia because nobody knew why, but it ended up turning out after the draft. Everybody talked about there was some injury concerns or things that they found on his medical record, and well, he's just gone out for Philadelphia and played super well. So I don't know. Sometimes I think teams get caught up too much in the medical records, but sometimes it turns out to be right. Like sometimes teams find things in these interviews and they end up being really bad, and guys are not able to live up to their potential. So hopefully things go well with Josh Simmons. Like I said, wasn't able to participate. I don't know if he's going to do anything at his pro day. I'm not sure, but I think would be a great pick for the Ravens here at 27. Probably going to let Ronnie Stanley walk in free agency. Just don't really have the flexibility to be able to pay him, especially after his injury history. So I think that's a tackle here at 27. Josh Simmons would be a great pick for the Ravens. Lions at 28 have a lot of needs on the defensive side of the ball. I think you look at these three edge rushers here: Jalen Walker, Ezeraku, Nick Scorton. I think edge rusher is their biggest need. Walker and Ezeraku are probably a little bit too undersized for the Lions. They run a 4-3, and I think they're going to be looking for a guy that's a little bit bigger. Scorton fits the size mold, and I think is definitely in play here. But I am going to go with Malachi Starks. Not the biggest need. Safety isn't. It's definitely not their biggest need. But when you have a guy of his talent level still on the board here at 28, I think it's just too much to pass up on. I think Nick Scorton also just didn't have a great combine, so I think that is also in play here. But just having a guy of that talent level, even if it's not the biggest need, like we've seen teams that are good, like the Lions, like some of these teams that are picking in the back end of the first round, sometimes they don't go with their biggest need. They just go with a luxury pick, and that's why these teams stay good for so long. They draft the best players. They don't get too caught up in positions. They don't get too caught up in positional value or like, oh, we already have a good safety or we already have a good guard or we already have a good running back or tackle or receiver. Like they just take the best player available, and that's how they're able to stay good for so long. And I think Starks still being available here at 28. I don't know if if he'll actually last that long. I think he's much more talented than that, but it is hard to find a fit for him. Once he gets past some of those teams that are in the teens, I think there's some teams there like the Dolphins and the Colts that make a lot of sense. But once you get past those teams, it's hard to find a fit for him. But I think a team like the Lions, not the biggest need, but I think it's a great luxury pick for them, would make a lot of sense. Commanders at 29, I think would be sprinting to turn in the card for Kelvin Banks, another guy who, I don't know how he lasts this long, but he just does. It's just how it is. His stock has dropped a little bit, over the past couple weeks. I don't think he's necessarily dropped himself all the way to like end of the first round, but it's just how it's played out. Sometimes these things happen in the draft. Guys go later than what we expect, and sometimes you just look up and it's like, I don't even know how this guy's still available. But then you look at some of the guys in front of him and you're like, well, sometimes it's just hard to get a guy in at a certain spot that you expect. And sometimes guys just slip further than what we would think. So, but I think Commanders, this would be a great pick here. Had a great season last year, obviously, but still need to improve a lot of things on that team, mainly offensive line. Keep Jaden Daniels upright, I think, is priority number one. I mean, you're going to be eventually paying this guy a ton of money. He's probably going to set an absolutely record setting deal whenever he's eligible to. So keep him upright, keep him healthy. Kelvin Banks help you do that. Bills at 30. This might be a little bit of a reach, might be a little bit of a shocker to some people. I'm going to go Darian Porter from Iowa State. I wanted to get him in the first round really badly. Had a great combine. I mean, so I think PFF, yeah, 6'4", 200. I don't think he measured in quite that high at the combine. I think he was like 6'3", and I don't remember exactly what his weight was. His weight was around 200 though, but ran a blazing 40. I believe it was sub 4.4. It was like 4.39 or 4.38. I'm not even sure. I need to double check that, but it was in the 4.3s, super fast for a guy that's that big. And in the on the field drills, I thought he looked really good. I think he wasn't the most fluid corner out there, but he's 6'3". He's not going to be the most fluid corner out there, but he looked, for his size, he moved really well, and I thought he was just, I think he had one of the best combines out of all the defensive backs, out of really all the players, just defensive or offensive. I think he had an amazing combine, huge riser, kind of like Maxwell Harrison I talked about earlier. He made himself a lot of money this week for sure, and I wanted to get him in the first round. So Chiefs at 31. I think offensive line, it just has to be. It's after they got mauled in the Super Bowl by the Eagles. I think offensive line is just, it's just going to happen. Kind of like 2 years ago, or whenever that was. I guess it's been more than 2 years, 4 years ago now, when they lost to the Bucks. They completely revamped their offensive line because they just got mauled at the line of scrimmage in that game. I don't think they're going to completely redo their O line, but I think they are going to add some pieces, move some guys, cut some guys, trade some guys, whatever it is, draft some. I mean, they need to invest in the offensive line more so than what they have been. I think, I don't know what exactly happens with Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey. I mean, Joe Tooney, like, you can't necessarily pour an insane amount of money into the interior of your offensive line, but all three of those guys are really good and it would be really nice to keep them around. But they need to invest in some good tackles because the tackle play has just been very poor the last couple of years. Um, Josh Connerly, I think, would be a great pick. Super athletic guy. Has, I believe, a big basketball background. Like, I mean, this guy is just, I really love him. I think he's a great player. I think definitely a world where he doesn't make it into the first round, but I think he could go as highly as, I think he could go to the Rams. I think he could go to a lot of these teams. I think he could go to like the Cardinals potentially. I mean, there's a lot of teams I think he could fit in on. I think Ravens, of course, like Washington, but I think Chiefs be able to snatch him up here at 31 would be a great pick for them. They need to invest in the tackle position for sure. 32 with the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, how could it not be a big guy? We're going to go Tyler Booker, maybe the biggest guy in this draft. I mean, just a massive human being. Um, I think, this is a scenario where I'm kind of rolling with, they're going to let Mekhi Becton walk in free agency, instantly just replace him with another absolutely massive, hulking, huge dude at guard, just going to maul people in the run game, create, I mean, just semi truck wide holes for Saquon Barkley to run through. And Saquon Barkley is going to go run for 2,000 more yards next year. And Eagles will probably be right back in the NFC Championship, Super Bowl probably again. So it's just what they do. They draft offensive line, defensive line, and then they just keep cycling through these guys. They develop them. And the next thing you know, they are starters, all pros, pro bowlers, playing really, really well in the league. So I think that's, Tyler Booker just makes a ton of sense for them. They love to draft some big offensive linemen, and would make a lot of sense at 32 for the Philadelphia Eagles. So yeah, that's been my mock draft 2.0. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe, drop a comment down below. If you think my team or your team was just absolutely horrible pick, I don't know what I'm talking about at all, let me know in the comments. We can have hopefully some healthy discussion down there. I hope to have a couple more combine related videos for you guys in the near future, some winners and losers of the combine. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.